There's a stretch of road in Black Hollow, West Virginia, where the trees grow too thick, and the wind always carries a hush as if the forest itself is keeping secrets. For decades, locals avoided that road after sundown, muttering the same warning: don't look toward the Cold Farm. The Cold Farm had been abandoned since 1991, when the entire Dwyer family, parents, 3 children, and an uncle, vanished without a trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood. Just plates still set on the dinner table and a half-lit fireplace crackling in silence. FBI files marked the case unsolved and inactive after 3 years of fruitless searching. No relatives claimed the land. No buyer ever came forward. The story faded from headlines and the house fell into rot, vines curling over secrets. But in 2019, a true crime podcaster named Rachel Miner reopened the case after she received a disturbing anonymous tip. They didn't leave. They were taken by something underneath the house. With that cryptic message, Rachel packed her gear and drove into Black Hollow. Locals didn't welcome outsiders asking questions. At the gas station, a man in overalls told her, "You poke at that place, it pokes back. That farm, don't forget." She laughed politely, but he didn't laugh with her. Rachel checked into a rundown motel just 5 miles from the farm. The clerk recognized the name Cold Farm instantly. "Only a fool goes up there after dark," she said. "You won't hear the trees, but they'll hear you." Rachel's plan was simple: spend one night at the house, record everything, and document her findings. She had no idea what she'd walk into, or what wouldn't let her leave. She arrived on a gray October afternoon. The Cold Farm looked like a corpse in the woods. Sagging roof, busted windows, rust on the porch swing, and every part of it covered in a thick layer of dust and mold. Yet, the door was unlocked. Inside, the house felt preserved. A layer of dust, yes, but no cobwebs. The children's toys were in a neat pile near the fireplace. A single red shoe sat in the hallway. The air smelled faintly of rot and something worse: iron. Rachel set her voice recorder down and whispered, "I'm standing inside the Cold Farm, untouched since 1991, where 6 members of the Dwyer family reportedly vanished. The kitchen still has cereal boxes on the counter. This place feels wrong." She walked slowly down the hall, every creaking floorboard beneath her boots screaming into the silence. To her left, framed photos of the Dwyers still hung on the walls, faces frozen in time, smiling without knowing what was coming. Rachel paused in front of a photo showing the youngest daughter, Lucy, standing barefoot near the barn. A circle had been drawn into the dirt behind her, crudely carved. Rachel didn't notice it at first, but when she zoomed in with her phone, she realized it wasn't just dirt, it was symbols. She found Lucy's bedroom upstairs. Toys still lined the shelves and a music box sat on the nightstand. Rachel wound it, expecting the tinkling melody of childhood. But it let out a broken, screeching groan and then clicked 3 times. Then it stopped. That night, Rachel recorded her podcast episode in the living room. As she reviewed her audio, she froze. Around the 5-minute mark, a whisper came through her mic, low and raspy. "Why did you come here?" She rewound the clip. Her own voice was steady, no one else in the room. But the whisper was undeniable. It hadn't been there while she was recording. It had followed her in after. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. She jumped, heart pounding. "Probably just the wind," she muttered. But the wind doesn't drag furniture. The thud sounded like a chair toppling, or something being pulled. Against her better judgment, she climbed the stairs, flashlight in hand. The hallway stretched like a tunnel, the walls closing in. The door to the parents' room was ajar. Something inside scraped across the floor. Once, then silence. She pushed the door open. Nothing. But a heavy wardrobe had been dragged 3 feet across the room, leaving deep gouges in the wood floor. Rachel stood motionless. No footsteps, no wind. Just that strange metallic smell again. On the wall, behind where the wardrobe had been, was something else. A hatch. Small, square, and sealed shut with thick black nails. A red X was painted across it in a child's handwriting. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay on the couch, flashlight in hand, recorder running. But around 3:14 a.m., she heard it again. Click, click, click. The sound of the music box. And quiet, giggling from the hallway upstairs. Rachel sat up, holding her breath. The giggling had stopped, but something moved in the darkness. A shadow flickered past the top of the stairs, small, like a child. She grabbed her recorder, whispering into it, "Something's here with me." She played back the recording immediately. Her whisper came through, then silence, then softly,
"Play with me." A voice high-pitched and unnatural. Not Rachel's, not human.
By sunrise, Rachel had decided she needed help. She drove back into town and met with Sheriff Damon Crawley, a heavyset man in his 60s who'd been deputy back in 1991. He didn't want to talk. "I lost 3 men in that house," he said. "None of them were found either." Rachel leaned forward. "You think something took them?" He paused, then looked out the window. "No, I think that place now opens, and when it opens, it takes." He told her the official reports had been altered. The original investigation found a sealed basement beneath the cold farm. But the next day, it was gone, replaced by solid earth, like it had never existed. "We thought we were losing our minds," he muttered. He told her the official IM reports had been altered. The original investigation found a sealed basement beneath the cold farm. But the next day, it was gone, replaced by solid earth, like it had never existed. "We thought we were losing our minds," he muttered. The final nail came loose with a sickening snap. The hatch creaked open. Inside was a narrow crawl space, barely wide enough to fit a child. The air was thick with the stench of rot. Something scratched against the far wall. She pulled out her flashlight and peered in. There, etched into the wood in childish scrawl, were dozens of names. Some she recognized from missing persons reports, all in different handwriting, all ending in, "He took me." Suddenly something moved inside the crawl space. Fast, too fast. Rachel scrambled back, heart pounding. The hatch slammed shut on its own, the red X glowing faintly as if freshly painted. Rachel fled the room. Downstairs, the TV, unplugged and covered in dust, sputtered to life. A news broadcast played from 1991, showing the Dwyer family at a school function. In the background of the footage, a shadow stood watching, its eyes glowing white. Rachel rushed forward and yanked the TV cord from the wall, even though it wasn't plugged in to begin with. The screen went black instantly. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. "What the hell is happening in this house?" she whispered. She called her producer, Jordan, and left a message. "This place isn't empty," she said. "It's like time folds inside it, and there's something under the house, something that wants people to remember it." She scoured old public records at the town library and found a shocking piece of history. The Dwyer land had once been the site of a boys' workhouse in the 1800s. Dozens of children had died there, beaten, starved, buried in unmarked graves. Local legend spoke of a man called the Hollow Father, a twisted caretaker who forced children to work underground tunnels. He was said to have vanished after the workhouse was shut down, but some believed he'd never really left. Rachel connected the dots. Every few decades, people near Black Hollow vanished, mostly children, always near the cold farm, always around autumn. She mapped out the disappearances on her laptop. The pattern was unmistakable. Something reawakened every 27 years. The year was 2019, exactly 27 years since the Dwyers vanished in 1992. Rachel felt a cold sweat on her neck. The cycle had returned, and she was now inside it. That night, she returned to the house and went down to the root cellar. Beneath a pile of crumbled bricks, she found a trap door. It had the same symbols carved in the dirt from the photo of Lucy Dwyer, the same markings from the workhouse files. She opened the trap door and descended into darkness. Her flashlight flickered. The narrow stone passage was carved crudely, with claw marks along the walls. She heard something ahead, dragging footsteps. Slow, heavy. The passage led to a massive underground chamber lined with iron cages. Chains hung from the ceiling. Old children's shoes, broken toys, and bones littered the corners. On the far wall, written in rust-colored streaks, was a sentence. "He doesn't eat the dead, he keeps them." Rachel turned to run, but something was standing in the tunnel. It was tall, skeletal, dressed in rags. Its face was wrapped in a dirty sack, stitched where the mouth should be. It raised a hand, long black fingers, and pointed at her silently. Rachel stumbled backward, her flashlight dropping to the floor. The beam spun wildly, casting shadows that stretched and twisted like claws. The figure didn't move. It just pointed, as if selecting her for something. She grabbed the flashlight and bolted up the tunnel, heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear the sound of something scraping along the stone. Slow and steady, like metal dragging across concrete. She burst into the cellar, slammed the trapdoor shut, and shoved bricks back over it. Her hands were shaking, her breath ragged. Whatever was down there wasn't just a ghost. It was real, and it knew she had seen it. She checked her recorder. It had captured everything, her steps, her breathing, and at one point the voice. It hissed through the static. "You opened the door, now I'm awake." Rachel uploaded part of the recording to her podcast and titled the episode, "The Cold Farm, What I Saw Below." Within 24 hours, it received over 50,000 listens. People were horrified and intrigued. Messages poured in. One stood out. It was from a man named Henry Bell, who claimed to have survived the cold farm as a boy in 1965. He said he'd been trapped in the underground tunnels with other children. "Only I got out. The others changed." She arranged to meet Henry in a nearby diner. He was old now, eyes sunken but alert. "You weren't supposed to go down there," he told her. "It doesn't like to be seen. When you look at it, it follows you." Henry drew her a map of the original tunnels, the workhouse foundations, and the hiding places. "It's older than the house," he said. "Older than the town. The children don't leave. They become its eyes." He gave her one final warning. "Don't stay in the house again. Once it marks you, it doesn't stop." He showed her his arm. Deep scars ran down it like teeth marks. "I still hear them scratching at night." Rachel knew she should leave, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. That night she returned to the house, not to investigate, but to confront. She set up cameras throughout the house. One pointed at the hatch upstairs, one in the root cellar. She wanted the world to see what she'd seen. As the night wore on, Rachel sat in the living room, staring at the feed from her cameras. Her eyes flickered between the upstairs hatch and the root cellar. Every now and then, she would hear something, like a faint scraping sound. But when she checked, it was nothing. Around 2:30 a.m., the cameras picked up movement. The camera upstairs showed the hatch door slowly creaking open. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She rushed to the room, her heart pounding. There was nothing when she arrived, just the dim glow of her flashlight and the wide open door. Then, from the corner of the room, she saw it. A small figure standing just out of the light. It wasn't a child. It wasn't anything human. It was black, its skin glistening like wet leather, and its eyes, two glowing orbs, stared back at her. Frozen, Rachel watched as the figure slowly raised its arm and pointed toward the hatch. It was a silent command. It wanted her to go. Without thinking, she stepped closer to the door, the floorboards creaking under her weight. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the floor below. The door slammed shut behind her, cutting off her escape. Her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The air turned thick, suffocating. Rachel could feel something moving in the shadows. The walls groaned. She could hear low whispers and then faintly the sound of children's laughter, distorted, echoing from the depths below. It was the laughter from the music box, but this time, it wasn't a child's laugh. It was something darker, something hungry. She reached into her bag for her phone, praying it still had battery. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Jordan. But the call went straight to voicemail. She left a message, her voice shaky. "It's coming for me. The door is shut. I can hear it. Oh God, it's real. The thing in the basement." The laughter grew louder, closer. She scrambled to her feet, but as she turned, she saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was the same tall, skeletal form. But this time, it wasn't pointing. It was reaching out with long, bony fingers. Rachel screamed, backing into the wall. The figure stepped closer, its eyes glowing brighter. She swung her bag at it, but her hands passed through its body like smoke. It wasn't solid. It wasn't alive. With a jolt, the figure lunged forward, wrapping its fingers around Rachel's throat. She gasped, struggling to breathe. The cold of its touch burned her skin. As she gasped for air, a voice, deep, gravelly, and ancient, whispered in her ear. "You opened the door. Now you will stay." Rachel fought, her hands clawing at the figure's icy grip. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her vision blurred. The room spun, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the grip released. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The figure stood motionless, watching her. Its glowing eyes flickered like dying embers. Then it turned, walking toward the door as though it had accomplished its purpose. It didn't vanish. It simply faded, like a shadow under the moon. Rachel was paralyzed, too terrified to move, but somehow, she found the strength to crawl across the floor to the door. She flung it open, her heart hammered in her chest as she stumbled into the hallway. Upstairs, she could hear the soft scrape of the music box again, but this time it wasn't playing by itself. The wind picked up, rattling the windows. The room seemed to be closing in on her, the walls growing tighter, pushing her toward the center of the house. She ran, her legs weak beneath her, and bolted for the front door. But as she reached it, the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. Rachel screamed and tugged at the handle, but it was locked, sealed from the inside. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message from Jordan. "I'm coming to get you. Stay inside the house, don't leave." Her breath caught in her throat. Stay inside? But she couldn't. She had to get out. She turned and ran toward the back door. The hallway was darker now, the shadows creeping along the walls like living things. But the door was locked too, and she could feel something, or someone, standing behind her. Slowly, she turned. The figure was back, standing just at the edge of the dim light. Its face was twisted in agony, eyes wide and staring. It reached out toward her again, and Rachel could hear the sound of its bones grinding together. The air was thick with a suffocating cold as the figure closed in on her. She reached for the door handle again, her hands slick with sweat. In desperation, she kicked at the door, yelling for help. But the house seemed to close in, pushing her deeper into its grasp. With a final, desperate push, the door flew open, and Rachel stumbled out into the yard. She didn't look back, her body on autopilot as she sprinted toward the woods. But when she glanced over her shoulder, she saw the lights in the house flicker, and then go dark, completely. Rachel didn't stop running. Her breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as she darted through the trees, the cold night air biting at her skin. The woods around the cold farm were dense, the thick branches cutting into her arms as she pushed through the underbrush. But no matter how far she ran, she could feel the presence behind her. It was watching her, waiting. Finally, she reached the edge of the woods and stumbled into the clearing. In the distance, she could see the faint lights of a nearby road. But before she could move toward it, a low growl sounded from behind her. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something far more sinister. Turning slowly, Rachel's blood ran cold. The figure was there, standing at the edge of the woods, its hollow eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. It didn't move, but she could feel its gaze on her. The whispering started again, this time louder, closer. She could make out words. "You can't leave. You belong to us." She stumbled backward, her legs shaking. She turned again to flee, but the path to the road was now blocked. The trees seemed to close in, the shadows thickening. The figure didn't chase her. It just stood there, waiting. Rachel realized with a sickening dread that the figure wasn't just part of the house. It was part of everything around here. The land, the woods, the air itself. It was the curse of Black Hollow, a force that had been feeding on the fear and souls of the people who lived there for generations. She collapsed to her knees, the weight of the realization sinking in. There was no escaping, no way out. The house would never let her go. It wanted her, And as the last shreds of her strength faded, she heard the music box again. Faint, but unmistakable. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Jordan. This time, he had attached a picture. The image showed her running through the woods, taken from a distance. But there was something in the corner of the frame that made Rachel's heart stop. The same figure from the house, standing among the trees, watching. The message from Jordan read, "Get out of there now." But it was already too late. The figure stepped forward from the darkness, and this time, it moved toward her with purpose. Its long fingers reached out for her, and as they touched her arm, her skin burned. It was cold. So cold. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure dragged her toward the woods, and as she passed through the trees, the ground beneath her feet seemed to sink. The earth was pulling her in, like quicksand. She screamed again, but it was drowned out by the sound of the music box playing louder now, like it was inside her head. As the ground swallowed her, Rachel felt herself being pulled downward, deeper into the earth, into the black hollow that had claimed so many before her. The last thing she heard was the whispering voice, "Welcome home." Rachel awoke in darkness. Her body felt heavy, as if it was pinned beneath a mountain. Her head throbbed, and when she tried to move, the earth pressed back, cold and unyielding. Panic surged through her chest, and she gasped for air, only to realize she wasn't in the woods anymore. Her hands brushed against something damp. Her fingers trembled as she touched the walls of a narrow tunnel. The air smelled of mildew, rot, and something far worse. She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. The laughter started again, faint at first, then growing louder. It was coming from the walls, from the very stones themselves. Rachel pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound wouldn't go away. It was as if the laughter was inside her head, filling her mind with horrifying images of children, faces twisted in agony. She pulled herself to her feet, struggling to ignore the gnawing fear that gripped her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she didn't know where to go. She felt something pulling at her, tugging her deeper into the bowels of the earth. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the air became. Ahead, there was a flicker of light. Just a glimmer, but it was enough to guide her. She moved toward it, dragging herself through the muck, desperate for escape. But as she drew closer, the light grew brighter, revealing a room. An underground chamber, large and suffocating. The walls were lined with old rotting cages, some of them open, others still locked. Her breath caught in her throat as she noticed the bones scattered across the floor, broken toys, scraps of old clothing. This was a holding place, a place where children had been kept, a place where they had never left. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, covered in dark stains. Rachel felt a chill crawl up her spine as she realized what it was. A ritual site, the heart of the Cold Farm's curse. The Hollow Father had used this place for his twisted rituals, feeding the land with the souls of the innocent. The walls seemed to close in around her. She could feel something else here, a presence much older than the Cold Farm, older than the land itself. It was the darkness that had existed long before the house, before the town. The darkness that had claimed the children, the workers, the families. As she looked around the chamber, her eyes fell on something in the corner, a shape barely visible in the flickering light. It was the music box, the same one she had heard over and over. But now it was open, and the music had stopped. The silence was deafening. Rachel reached for the box, her hand trembling as she touched its cold surface. The moment her fingers brushed the metal, a sharp, painful jolt ran through her, like electricity shooting through her veins. The world around her seemed to shudder. Rachel's body jerked as the jolt of energy coursed through her. Her muscles spasmed, her vision blurring. For a moment, everything seemed to go white. Then it all came crashing back. She was still in the underground chamber, but now it felt different. The air was heavier, suffocating, as if something had shifted. The music box snapped shut on its own. A low hum began to emanate from it, reverberating through the walls. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. She couldn't understand them, but the panic in the voices was clear. It knew she had awakened something. Rachel's heart pounded. She looked around frantically, the walls of the chamber now seeming to pulse as if alive. The ground trembled beneath her feet. She stumbled back, her hands grasping at the cold stone walls for support. Her eyes darted to the door, the exit, but it was no longer there. It had vanished. She pulled herself to her feet, struggling to ignore the gnawing fear that gripped her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she didn't know where to go. She felt something pulling at her, tugging her deeper into the bowels of the earth. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the air became. The shadows in the chamber began to move. They twisted and writhed, taking shape. Shapes that were vague at first, but soon took the form of children. They were all around her now, their hollow eyes staring at her, their faces frozen in expressions of torment. She could hear them calling to her, beckoning her to join them. Rachel backed away, her breath coming faster, her hands trembling. The shadows followed her, crawling along the walls, twisting toward her like fingers of smoke. She could feel them brushing against her skin, like cold, invisible hands. Then something moved behind her. Something large, something that filled the room with an unbearable presence. She turned slowly, her throat tight, her legs unable to move. It was him, the hollow father, the twisted figure of a man, tall and skeletal, his face obscured by rags, his body covered in the same strange symbols that now adorned the walls. He reached out, not with hands, but with claws, long, sharp fingers that scraped across the stone floor, leaving deep gouges in the earth. Rachel's mind screamed at her to run, to get away, but her body refused to obey. The figure took another step closer, its hollow eyes fixed on her, its mouth opening, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. Rachel tried to scream, but no sound escaped. She could feel herself being drawn toward the hollow father, as if she were tethered to him by some invisible force. She struggled against it, but the more she fought, the stronger it became. Her vision blurred once more, the world around her fading as she felt herself being pulled deeper into the shadows. And then, silence. The whispers stopped. The shadows withdrew. The hollow father was gone. The chamber was empty, and Rachel was alone. But something had changed. She could feel it in her bones. She was no longer just a visitor in this place. She was a part of it. Rachel's head was spinning. She stood alone in the chamber, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her. Her mind was a blur, unable to fully grasp the truth of what she had just experienced. The hollow father was gone, but the air still felt thick with his presence. The curse hadn't let go. She turned toward the wall, her fingers brushing against the markings, feeling the coldness of the stone beneath her touch. The symbols seemed to pulse, faintly glowing as if they were alive. Her head throbbed as though the very ground was calling out to her, urging her to understand, to accept her fate. Her body trembled. She had no idea what to do next. Should she try to leave? Should she escape before the hollow father returned? Or was there something more she needed to learn? Something she had been chosen to uncover. The hum of the music box echoed through the chamber again, louder this time, like a heartbeat. Rachel looked down at it. Its lid had opened by itself, and inside, the little ballerina spun slowly, her movements stiff and mechanical. The box had become part of the curse, part of the land, part of her. Suddenly, Rachel felt a pull, a strange sensation that made her knees buckle. It was as if the ground beneath her feet was no longer solid, as though it were shifting. She stumbled back, only to find herself facing a new doorway, a narrow passageway that hadn't been there moments before. Her breath caught in her throat. The doorway was different. It wasn't just the exit she had hoped for. It felt like a trap. Yet something inside her told her that this was the path she needed to follow. A cold determination settled in her chest. Rachel hesitated, but then, without another thought, she moved toward it. Her footsteps echoed off the stone, and the tunnel seemed to stretch out endlessly before her. As she walked, the walls seemed to close in, the air growing colder, heavier. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. She could hear her own breath echoing in the narrow space, feel the weight of the silence pressing against her. But then, just as she thought she could take no more, She saw a flicker of light ahead. It was a small flickering flame like the glow of a lantern. Rachel moved toward it almost instinctively. As she neared the source of the light, her heart skipped a beat. It was a door. But this wasn't just any door. It was old, worn, and covered in symbols similar to those she had seen before. She placed her hand on the door. The instant she did, she felt it. The presence. It was like a whisper in her mind, a pull toward the other side. She could hear faint voices, muffled but insistent. They were calling her, begging her to open it. Rachel's hand lingered on the door, her pulse racing. She could feel the coldness emanating from it, as if it were a threshold between worlds. The voices behind it grew louder, more urgent. They knew her name. They knew everything about her. She was part of this story now. A shiver ran down her spine. She didn't want to open the door, but her fingers had already begun to turn the handle. The wood creaked under her touch, and for a moment, she thought she heard the distant sound of someone crying, soft and broken. She took a deep breath and pulled the door open. A cold gust of wind rushed past her, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. She stepped through, and the world around her seemed to shift. The light from the lantern flickered, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. The room she entered was vast, and yet it felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were closing in with every breath she took. The floor was covered in dark stains, like dried blood. Her footfalls echoed loudly in the silence, the sound stretching into an unnatural stillness. The air here was thick with a palpable sense of wrongness. It was as though something ancient and malevolent had settled into the bones of the place, infecting it with its presence. Rachel's throat tightened as she looked around, trying to find something, anything that could help her understand what she was walking into. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal. Upon it was a book, its pages cracked and yellowed with age. The moment Rachel's eyes fell on it, she knew. This was the source of the curse. The book held the secrets of Black Hollow, the dark history that had been buried for generations. She stepped toward it, the voices in her mind growing louder. They were pleading now, their tones rising in frantic urgency. "Read it," they seemed to whisper. "Uncover the truth." But Rachel hesitated. She wasn't sure if she could handle what was inside, what it would mean to unlock the full history of this cursed place. But there was no turning back. She had come this far, and the darkness was already a part of her. She had to know. With trembling hands, she reached out and opened the book. The pages were brittle, threatening to crumble under her touch. As her fingers brushed over the first page, a surge of cold energy flooded her body. She gasped, stumbling backward as a vision crashed into her mind. The images were jumbled, flashes of faces twisted and contorted in agony. The Hollow Father stood before her, his mouth moving, but no sound came out, no sound. Then the words began to form in her mind, not spoken, but understood. "You've already been claimed. There is no escaping the curse now." The voice was deep, ancient, and it chilled her to the bone. The room seemed to pulse with the weight of the words, and Rachel's world spun out of control. Rachel staggered back from the book, her breath shallow, her hands shaking. The room was spinning, and the whispers grew louder, as if the walls themselves were alive with the sound. The presence of the Hollow Father filled the air, suffocating her. The cold was unbearable now, like ice seeping into her bones. Her eyes darted around the room, desperate for something to ground her. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, forming grotesque shapes that slithered across the walls. The figures, the children from before, were back, their hollow eyes following her every move, their mouths open in silent screams. A voice, low and gravelly, whispered in her ear, "You cannot leave." The words seemed to echo inside her mind, vibrating through her skull. Rachel's heart raced and her legs felt weak beneath her. She wanted to run, to escape, but she couldn't. The door had vanished again, swallowed by the shadows. The stone pedestal trembled. The book on it began to glow with an eerie light, its pages turning on their own. Rachel stumbled forward, her mind fighting to stay conscious as the book's words burned into her thoughts. She could feel it. The history of Black Hollow, the cursed land, the souls trapped in its depths. Souls. The first image flashed before her eyes. A village once full of life, now abandoned, its streets empty. The people who had lived there were gone, their bodies turned to dust, their souls claimed by the curse. In the distance, she saw the silhouette of a man, the Hollow Father, standing at the edge of the village watching as the land died around him. The next image was worse. The ground cracked open, and from the depths dark tendrils rose, pulling the people back into the earth, their screams echoing through the air. The curse had been born here, from the very soil of Black Hollow. The land had fed on fear and despair for centuries, growing stronger with every soul it consumed. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as the images grew more violent. She saw families being torn apart, children lost to the curse, their spirits trapped in the darkness. The Hollow Father had made a pact with the land, offering its souls in exchange for immortality, for power. And now the curse was coming for her. The shadows in the room began to grow longer, more menacing, as if they were stretching toward her. Rachel could feel them pulling at her, tugging at her very soul. She was part of the curse now, and there was no escape. The land had claimed her, just as it had claimed everyone before her. But then, a thought flickered in her mind, a memory. Jordan. He had warned her, told her to stay inside. Had he seen something? Had he known what she was walking into? She had to get back to him. But how? The room seemed to be closing in, and the shadows were suffocating her. She stumbled to her feet, her legs trembling, her eyes wild. The book lay open on the pedestal. The glowing words now burned into her retinas. She could feel the Hollow Father watching her, waiting for her to make a choice. Stay or leave. There was no right answer. There was only the curse. And her. Rachel's mind raced. Stay or leave. The choices felt hollow, meaningless. It was as if the curse had already chosen for her. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the shadows closed in, wrapping around her like a suffocating cloak. She could feel their cold fingers brushing against her skin, tightening their grip. With all the strength she could muster, Rachel pushed through the fear. She had to fight even if it seemed pointless. She took one last look at the book, the cursed pages still glowing with that unnatural light. The words burned into her mind like fire. She couldn't stay here, she couldn't become part of it. Her feet moved almost on their own, dragging her toward the door. But it wasn't there. It was as though the room had shifted again, its boundaries twisting and warping around her. The walls seemed to be breathing, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The land itself was alive. The voices in her head grew louder, a cacophony of whispers urging her to stay. "You're one of us now," they chanted, over and over. Rachel clutched her ears, trying to block them out, but it was no use. The words were inside her, and she couldn't escape them. Then a crackling sound broke through the chaos. She turned to see a flicker of light in the corner of the room. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its outline indistinct like smoke. The figure stepped forward, and Rachel's heart froze. It was Jordan, or someone who looked like him. His face was gaunt, hollow-eyed. His skin stretched tight over his bones. His lips curled into a twisted smile as he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. He wasn't Jordan anymore. He had been claimed, just like everyone else in Black Hollow. The curse had taken him, and now it wanted her too. "You shouldn't have come here, Rachel." His voice was cold, hollow, like the wind itself. It sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't really him. It was just the curse taking on his form, a reminder of what awaited her if she didn't escape. Rachel backed away, her legs trembling beneath her. She had to get out. There had to be a way. But the room was shifting again, the walls closing in on her. She reached for the book one last time, her fingers brushing the pages. The light flickered. Then, a new image filled her mind. It was a door. A doorway just like the one she had seen earlier, only this one was different. It was old, but it seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if it held the answer to everything. Rachel didn't hesitate. She turned and ran toward it, her feet carrying her faster than she thought possible. The door loomed ahead, and as she reached it, her hand touched the cold wood. The whispers stopped. The shadows stopped moving. It was now or never. With a burst of adrenaline, she threw the door open and stepped through, leaving Black Hollow behind. Or so she thought. The door slammed shut behind her with a deafening thud, the sound echoing through the emptiness. Rachel stood in a dimly lit room, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she just stood there, catching her breath, as the echoes of the curse began to fade. She had made it. She was out. Or so she thought. Or the room around her seemed unfamiliar, but there was a sense of recognition, like she had been here before, like this place had been waiting for her. The walls were adorned with ancient faded tapestries, and the air smelled of old wood and dust. It was peaceful here, too peaceful. The stillness felt wrong. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion. Had she really escaped Black Hollow? Was it over? Or had she simply walked into another part of the curse? She looked around, her eyes frantic, but there was no sign of the Hollow Father, no sign of the shadows that had haunted her. The room was empty, silent, but that only made her more uneasy. Suddenly she heard it, a whisper, soft, almost too faint to hear, but unmistakable. Rachel froze, her body tensing. The voice called her name, and it was a voice she knew all too well, Jordan's voice. Rachel. The whisper echoed again, closer now. Her stomach twisted in fear. She spun around, but there was no one there. The room was still empty. But then, something caught her eye. In the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, she saw a figure. It was just a silhouette, barely visible, but she could feel its eyes on her. She took a hesitant step forward, her feet dragging through the cold, dusty floor. As she approached the figure, her breath caught in her throat. The figure was Jordan, or at least, it looked like him. But something was off. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale and stretched thin. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Rachel reached out toward him, her heart racing. She wanted to believe it was him. She wanted to believe he had found a way to escape the curse. But as her fingers brushed against his arm, her skin crawled. It wasn't him. It was the curse. The land had taken him, and now it was using his form to keep her trapped. No, Rachel whispered, backing away, her chest tight with panic. No, no, no. She turned, her legs propelling her toward the door, but the moment her hand touched the handle, she froze. It was locked. The shadows in the room began to shift, to move in her direction. The walls seemed to pulse, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The room wasn't a sanctuary. It was another part of the curse, a reflection of Black Hollow itself. It had never let her go. Rachel fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as the truth sank in. She wasn't free. The curse had followed her. It always would. There was no escaping Black Hollow, no escaping the Hollow Father. The land had claimed her, and now, like all the others before her, she was lost to it forever.